Hi, I'm Jennifer Sir from the Sewing Room, and today we're going to finish this skirt and put a waistband on it. So this is our waistband tutorial. Here's my skirt. I've already done everything including the hem, which is usually, I'm not supposed to do it until last, but this fabric doesn't grow very much, so I thought I would be safe. Also, I've inserted my zipper, and I have another video up on YouTube for the inserting an invisible zipper by hand, so go check it out. Also, okay, so we'll get started. So we have our top of our waistband or top of our skirt unfinished, and I have a waistband here that I've already prepared. So I have my waistband with interfaced, it's a half of the width plus a half. So it was a 4" by 34" piece of fabric rectangle for the waistband, and my interfacing measured 2.5 inches by 34 inches, and I fused it on. The reason I have it not going all the way to the edge is because it makes it really bulky when you're stitching all the layers together. And also the reason why I didn't do just half was because when it gets folded in half, if that interfacing is right along the seam, then it doesn't really behave very well. Sometimes it makes your waistband, the top edge, not look so nice. So that is why I do that. I've gone ahead and I've pressed back one edge a 1/2 inch, because I'm only using 1/2 inch seam allowance on this. And I'm going to pin my waistband right sides together, and I'm going to leave on the front side, I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch overhanging for seam allowance. So I have now a 1/2 inch overlap or a 1/2 inch extension on the front side, and about 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch extension on the back side. That extension is where the button is going to go, because the front is going over the back. So now I'll sew this together at a 1/2 inch, starting at the front side. I'm adjusting everything as I go. When I come to a seam and it starts to roll towards me like this is doing here, then I just put my needle down, pick my presser foot up, and then tuck that little seam under the presser foot, and then keep going. That way the seam is going in exactly the direction that I want it to. Okay, now that we're at the end, I'm clipping my threads, taking my pins out, and I'm going to take it over to the iron and give it a nice little press. And what I'm going to do is press the seam allowance up towards the waistband, like this, but from the outside. Now that my skirt's been pressed, I am going to fold my, we'll start with the front side. I'm going to to fold this down, right sides together. So I have my seam allowance over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure those edges are matched. I'm going to pin it, and then I'm going to sew straight down. So if I have 1/2 inch seam allowance, yeah, I'm starting 1/2 inch seam allowance from the top. And again, it looks like this. I folded it over, right sides together. I'm going to stitch from the top here, and that will make the front edge of the waistband flush. Here we have some extra threads. It'll make it flush with the zipper opening. Here you can see close up. Now I'm going to clip my corners without going through the stitches to reduce the bulk. So we have a little right angle cut here and right here. And I'm going to move over to this side that has a bigger extension. And this one we have to do slightly differently. So from here, we want that seam allowance on the bottom to be going down like that. And we're going to fold this right sides down so that the seam allowances match. Pin it in place. So on the front side it looks like this, and on the inside it looks like this. So we don't have the seam allowances pressed up like we did for the front. I'm going to mark it with a friction pen just so you can see where we're going to stitch. And actually, as I'm doing this, I'm going to make it a narrower seam allowance so I have a little bit of a longer extension. So I'm going to stitch along this outer 1/4 inch away. I'm going to pivot at the seam allowance and then sew straight to where the seam allowance begins on the skirt. Clipping my threads. This is what's going to form the fly extension. So I'm clipping off my corners to reduce the bulk so it looks like that. And then I will turn it right side out. I'll use a chopstick to poke the corners out. Here we go. Gently poke your corners out. So now you can see we have a little waistband extension over here that sticks out a little bit. And on this side, we have a waistband that is flush with the edge. So the front side is flush, the back side has the extension. That's where the button goes. Now I'm going to pin it to the inside. Here we go. Let's get this camera a little bit. I'm going to tuck that seam allowance underneath and line up my waistband with the stitch line on the inside and pin all the way around. Now that my waistband is pinned all the way around, I can stitch it close to the waist seam here on the inside, or if I'm feeling risky, I can stitch it on the outside, which I am. I like to stitch it on the outside even though the pins are on the inside, because it will look better in the end. And I can try to take the pins out as I go or just sew over them. But I'm gonna get a cleaner, straighter line if I sew it on the outside. So starting at the side seam, or yeah, where the zipper is, I'm gonna sew 1/8 of an inch away from the seam all the way around that waistband. The key to doing this also is making sure that your pin heads are not too close to that seam. And voila, our waistband is stitched down. The only thing we have left to do is to sew a button and a buttonhole. So you want your buttonhole to be about 1/8 of an inch bigger than your button. I have a nice pretty shell button here, see? And I'll make my buttonhole just a little bit bigger. I have a 4-step buttonhole machine. And it's not automatic in any way. You have to adjust everything, but it makes a really nice and very durable buttonhole. When I'm cutting my buttonhole, I fold it in half and I make a little clip down the center, and then I clip to each end. That way, it's pretty safely that you're not going to cut all the way through buttonhole. I'm going to give my waistband one last quick press. Right over here at my trusty iron. And the last step will be to sew the button on by hand. How I'm going to get the position is I'm going to go ahead and zip up my zipper and then place my button based on where that buttonhole is. So my button is going to go right about there in the center. And I will now sew that on by hand. So I do a double strand with a big fat knot on the back side. And I make sure that I trim my tails so that I don't have a bunch of strings hanging out. Like this. A nice little knot. And then I will start from the back side. It's a 2-hole button, 2-hole shell button. So I only need to go back and forth about 4 or 5 times and then tie it off. So that's 2. One more time, and I will tie it off on the back side, which is just basically taking a tiny little stitch in your fabric near where your thread's coming out and then going through the loop. I do that a couple of times just to make it nice and strong. And then I bury my thread between the layers of fabric coming out a little bit like this and clipping my threads. I'm all done. I'm so excited to wear my new skirt. Here we go. It is ready to wear. Here you can see, I'm very excited. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Thanks.